Emma Thornton held the last piece of bread in her trembling hands. Tomorrow she had decided she would walk into the blizzard and let the mountain take her. 4 years of grief, 4 years of surviving alone. It was time to stop. Then she heard it. A child's scream cutting through the storm. "Mama! I want Mama!" And everything changed. This is her story. Emma Grace. Thornton's hands trembled as she reached for the last piece of bread on her shelf. Not from hunger, though. Hunger gnawed at her like a wolf at the door. Not from cold, though the Colorado winter of 1875 had turned her cabin into a tomb of ice. Her hands shook because she had finally made a decision. 4 years, 4 winters of surviving, 4 springs that never quite brought hope back to life, 4 summers watching the world bloom while something inside her remained frozen, 4 autumns letting the leaves fall like her own dead dreams. Tonight she would eat this final meal. Tomorrow, if the blizzard continued, she would walk into the white nothing and let the mountain take her. Simple, clean, the kind of ending that required no courage, only surrender. The cabin pressed in around her small as a coffin. 1 room, 1 hearth, 1 bed pushed against the wall where James had died, where she had held their son Benjamin as fever burned the life from his small body. The rifle hung above the door like a question she had been too afraid to answer. Her mother's Bible sat on the table unopened since the day she buried them side by side, wrapped in quilts she had sewn with her own hands for happier times. Emma walked to the window and pressed her palm against glass so cold it burned. Her reflection stared back. Hollow cheeks, eyes that had forgotten how to hope, hair she hadn't bothered to pin properly in weeks, 32 years old and already a ghost. "Don't matter," she whispered to the empty room. "Ain't nobody coming to see." Outside the storm screamed. 3 days now it had raged, turning the world into a wall of white. The temperature had dropped so fast the creek froze mid-flow water turned to sculpture in an instant. Snow piled against her door in drifts that reached the window sills. The wind howled through gaps in the walls that James had promised to fix, had never gotten around to fixing, would never fix now. Emma turned from the window and took inventory one last time. Half a sack of flour, the weevils already finding their way in. A quarter wheel of cheese hard as stone at the edges. Some dried venison that tasted like leather. 3 potatoes sprouting eyes in the corner reaching toward light that never came. A week maybe. 2 if she stretched, every bite chewed slowly, made each mouthful count. She had survived on less. But what was the point of surviving when you had nothing left to survive for? She picked up the bread, felt its weight. Such a small thing to be a last meal. Such a small life to have lived. That's when she heard it. A child's scream cutting through the storm like a knife through silk. Emma froze. The bread fell from her hands. For a moment she thought grief had finally broken. Her mind was giving her hallucinations, was letting her hear Benjamin's voice calling from beyond death. "Papa! Papa, help! Real!" The voice was real, high and terrified and desperate. Emma's blood turned to ice water. She grabbed the rifle and threw open the door. The storm slammed into her face, blinding, brutal. Snow drove sideways with the force of bullets. The wind hit her like a physical blow. She squinted into the white chaos, heart hammering against her ribs. "Hello?" she shouted into the void. "Where are you?" Nothing, just wind and ice and the howling emptiness of winter, then again closer, more desperate. "Mama, I want Mama." The word hit Emma in the chest like a fist. Mama. Benjamin had called for her at the end, when the fever burned highest, when his small body shook with chills no blanket could warm. She had held him and promised everything would be all right, had lied to him with love in her voice, had felt him go still in her arms. She wouldn't let it happen again. Emma didn't think, couldn't think. She plunged into the storm. The snow swallowed her whole. It reached past her thighs, thick and heavy as wet concrete. Each step was a battle against wind that wanted to knock her down, against cold that bit through her coat like teeth. Her lungs burned. Her fingers went numb around the rifle stock within seconds. "Hold on," she screamed. "I'm coming." She couldn't see more than 5 feet ahead. The world had disappeared, replaced by a wall of white chaos. But she pushed forward, following the sound of crying, the sound of a child who needed her, the sound of a second chance she hadn't known she was waiting for. 20 feet. 10. 5. A shape in the snow. Small. Too small. Fallen. Emma dropped to her knees beside a little girl who lay face down in a drift. Dark hair matted with ice. Coat too thin for this killing cold. Not moving. Emma's training took over the muscle memory of 4 years as a mother, of countless nights checking on Benjamin, of knowing without thinking what children needed. She turned the girl over, gently brushing snow from her face. The child's lips were blue. Her skin had that terrible gray pallor Emma remembered from the fever from death creeping in. But her eyes fluttered open, brown eyes, huge and terrified, and so achingly alive. "Are you an angel?" the girl whispered. Emma's chest seized. For one terrible moment she saw Benjamin's face. Benjamin at 6 calling for her from his bed. Benjamin asking questions she couldn't answer. Benjamin trusting her to make everything right even when she couldn't. "No child," Emma said, her voice rough. "Just a woman with a warm fire. Where's your pa?" "Sophie. Sophie." A man's voice raw with panic tearing through the storm. Emma looked up. He came through the blizzard like something summoned from her imagination. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair plastered to his head with snow. His face was all hard angles and desperate fear, gray eyes wild with terror. He wore a wool coat that had once been expensive, now soaked through and ruined. His boots were quality leather, the kind that cost more than Emma earned in a year when she still earned anything. Rich. This man was rich. What in God's name was he doing out here? "She ran," the man gasped, reaching for the child. "Saw your light, ran before I could stop her." Emma didn't waste words. "Inside, now, both of you." The man scooped up the girl without hesitation, cradling her against his chest like something infinitely precious. Emma led them back through the killing snow, each step harder than the last. The wind screamed. The cold bit. Her lungs burned. But she kept moving, kept pushing, kept refusing to let another child die on her watch. By the time they reached the porch, Emma couldn't feel her feet. She shoved open the door, and they tumbled inside, bringing the storm with them. She slammed the door shut and barred it, then turned to look at the strangers she had just invited into her home, the strangers who might be the last people she would ever save. The man knelt on her floor, clutching the child against his chest. His whole body shook with cold, or fear, or both. Up close, Emma could see the fine quality of his clothes now ruined, could see the lines of exhaustion carved into his face, could see the grief that lived in his eyes, the kind of grief she recognized because she saw it in her own mirror every day. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" Emma demanded, stripping off her wet coat. "In this storm with a child." The man looked up. Those gray eyes met hers, and Emma felt something shift in the air between them. Recognition, maybe. Two people who had both stared into the abyss and somehow survived. "Got lost," he said, his voice rough. "Horses spooked in the storm. Ran off. We've been walking for hours." "In this weather," Emma gestured at the howling world outside. "With a child, you trying to kill her." Something flickered in his face. Pain. Shame. He looked down at the girl in his arms. "We were visiting my wife's grave, up on Miller's Ridge." Emma's anger died in her throat. She knew that ridge, knew the small cemetery there where pioneers buried their dead in ground so hard it took 3 men to dig a grave. She had stood in similar snow herself 4 years ago, watching them lower James and Benjamin into the frozen earth. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. The man shook his head. "Don't. I don't need—" He broke off, swallowed hard. "She needs warmth. Please." Emma moved without thinking. She pulled the quilt from her bed, the one she had saved, the one that still smelled like home before everything went wrong, and wrapped it around the girl. The child's face was still gray, her lips still blue, but her eyes were open now, focusing. "Get her closer to the fire," Emma said. "I'll heat some broth." The man carried his daughter to the hearth, moving stiffly, like someone who had pushed past all limits and was running on nothing but will. Emma hung a pot over the flames and added the last of her venison broth. It wasn't much. It wouldn't fill 3 bellies, let alone provide the warmth these two needed. But it was all she had. She would manage. She always managed. The girl stirred in her father's arms. "Sophie," the man said softly. "Sophie, honey, can you hear me?" The child's eyes opened wider, finding her father's face. "Papa." "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now." "Cold, Papa. So cold." "I know. This nice lady's going to help us warm up, okay?" Sophie's gaze drifted to Emma, studying her with the unself-conscious directness of children. Emma felt stripped bare under that innocent scrutiny. "What's your name?" Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma," she said. "Emma Thornton. I'm Sophie Rose Harrison. I'm 6 3/4." The girl said it with pride, like that fraction mattered enormously. Emma almost smiled. Almost. 3/4 is very important. Mama always said that too. Sophie's face fell. "She's in heaven now." Emma's hands stilled on the pot. Heaven. Such an easy word for children. Such a complicated concept for those left behind. Was Benjamin in heaven? Was James? Did they watch her from some better place? Did they see what she had become in their absence? Did they forgive her for wanting to join them? "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Emma said quietly. The man looked up at her. His eyes held questions he wouldn't ask, gratitude he couldn't express. He opened his mouth closed. It tried again. "Thank you," he said finally, the words rough. "I don't know how to—" "Don't need thanks." Emma cut him off, her voice sharper than she intended. "Just need you both to get warm before you catch your death." She ladled the broth into 3 wooden bowls, giving Sophie the largest portion. The girl took it with both hands, blowing on the steam. Emma watched her drink, watched the color slowly return to her cheeks, watched life creep back into a child she had pulled from the edge of death. Worth it. Whatever came next, this moment was worth it. The man accepted his bowl with a nod of thanks. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, and she saw him cataloging details. The hollow of her cheeks, the worn fabric of her dress, the emptiness of her cupboards, the loneliness that clung to her cabin like a smell. "This was your last food," he said, not a question. Emma's jaw tightened. "I'll manage." "We can't take—" "Wasn't asking your permission." They stared at each other across the small room. Emma refused to look away, first refused to show weakness, refused to admit that she had just given away the only thing standing between herself and starvation. She had made her choice. She would live with it, or die with it. The man's eyes softened. "I'm William Harrison," he said. "Most people call me Will." "Mr. Harrison?" Emma nodded curtly. "Just Will. Please." Emma sat down on the floor across from them, cradling her own bowl. Mostly broth, just a few scraps of meat floating in thin liquid. She sipped slowly, trying not to calculate how many days she had just cut from her survival. It didn't matter. Couldn't matter. These people would have died out there. Some things were worth the cost. Sophie finished, first color blooming in her cheeks like roses. Her eyelids drooped, exhaustion pulling at her. "She can take the bed," Emma said. "Emma." "We can't—" "Wasn't asking." Emma stood. "Child needs proper rest." Will looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Wonder, maybe, or confusion at this strange woman who gave everything and asked nothing in return. "You're giving us your bed," he said quietly. "Your food, your shelter. I'm giving you a chance to not freeze to death. Ain't the same thing." "That broth was the last of your supplies." Emma's hands clenched. "You always this observant, or just when you're half frozen?" "Sorry." Will shook his head. "I notice things. Habit." "Bad habit," Emma muttered. "Makes folks uncomfortable." "So I've been told." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sophie had curled into a ball on the floor, too tired to stay awake another second. Will gathered her gently, carried her to the bed, tucked the quilts around her with hands that still trembled slightly. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, lingering there like he was reassuring himself. She was real. She was alive. She was safe. Emma watched her heart aching in ways she thought she had numbed. James used to do that with Benjamin, every night without fail, even when he was exhausted from working their small farm, even when the fever had him half delirious. He would kiss their son good night and tell him tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow never was. Emma looked away, focusing on the fire instead of the memories. Will returned to the hearth, lowering himself down with a wince. "She's been through a lot," he said quietly. "Her mother—" He stopped, tried again. "You don't have to tell me." "I know, but you saved our lives. Seems like you deserve to know who you saved." Emma poured the last of the broth into his bowl. "Drink that. You're still shaking." He obeyed, wrapping both hands around the warm wood. The firelight carved shadows into his face, showing the lines of grief and weariness Emma knew too well. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe 35, but sorrow aged a person. She knew that from experience. "Margaret died 2 years ago," Will said finally, his voice flat in the way of people reciting unbearable truths. "Giving birth. The baby a boy. He didn't make it either." Emma's hands stilled on her empty bowl. She knew this story, had lived a version of it herself. "I was in Denver," Will continued, "selling cattle. By the time I got word, by the time I rode back—" He shook his head. "They were already in the ground. Wasn't your fault. I should have been there." "You couldn't have known." "I should have been there." His eyes met hers, and Emma saw the guilt that ate at him, the weight that would never fully lift. A husband's place is with his wife. A father's place is with his family. "I was off making money we didn't need while my wife—" He couldn't finish. Emma understood. Some sentences had no endings. The fire popped. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountain, but inside something had shifted. Two strangers bound by grief warming themselves at the same small flame. "I lost my husband and son," Emma said quietly. "Typhoid fever. Took them both in the same week." Will looked at her, really looked at her. "I'm sorry. I nursed them day and night." The words came easier than Emma expected. "Did everything the doctor said. Did everything right. They died anyway. That wasn't your fault." Emma met his gaze steadily. "Neither was yours. But you'll carry it anyway. We all do." The silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. Outside, a tree branch cracked under the weight of snow. Somewhere distant, a wolf howled. The storm raged on. "How do you live with it?" Will asked. Emma thought about the question, really thought. "You don't?" she said finally. "Not the way you were before. That person's gone. You just become someone else, someone who keeps going. Is that enough? Some days." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Some days, it's all there is." They sat in silence for a long while, two people who had lost everything, finding strange comfort in shared understanding. The fire burned low. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Tomorrow felt very far away. "I should pay you," Will said eventually, "for the food, the shelter. I don't want your money. Please, let me—" "I said no." Emma's voice sharpened. "I didn't drag you out of that snow for payment. I did it because it was right. Because—" She stopped. "Because a child called out for her mama, and I couldn't just let her die. Because I'm so tired of death. Because maybe saving someone else could save me too." "Because what?" Will asked gently. Emma shook her head, unable to finish. She hadn't cried in 3 years, had thought herself incapable of tears. But something about this night, this storm, this man with his wounded eyes and his daughter, who reminded her so much of Benjamin, was cracking through her walls. "I'm sorry," she said, standing abruptly. I don't usually—" "Emma." His hand touched her elbow. Gentle, careful. "You don't have to apologize, not to me." She took a shaky breath, then another. When she turned back, his eyes held no pity, only understanding, only the recognition of one survivor seeing another. "One night," she said, her voice steadier. "Storm should break by morning. Then you head back to wherever you came from." Will nodded slowly. "One night." He didn't push, didn't argue, just accepted her terms with quiet grace. Emma wrapped herself in her thin blanket and settled near the fire. She wouldn't sleep, never slept with strangers in her home, but she could rest, could keep watch, could make sure they stayed safe through the long dark hours until dawn. That was what she told herself anyway. But as the hours passed, as the fire burned low and the storm continued to rage, she found herself watching Will. He sat against the wall, his gaze fixed on Sophie. Every few minutes he would check on her, adjust her blankets, brush hair from her face. A good father. It ached to watch. "You should rest," Emma said quietly. "Can't." Will's voice was rough. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her running into that storm. She's safe now. Because of you." He looked at her. "Because of you. I've met a lot of people, Emma Thornton. Rich people. Powerful people. None of them would have done what you did tonight. Then you've been meeting the wrong people. Maybe." He paused. "Or maybe you're just—" He stopped himself. "Nothing. Sorry. I'm tired. Saying things I shouldn't." Emma wanted to ask. The question sat on her tongue, demanding answers she wasn't sure she wanted. What had he been about to say? What did he see when he looked at her? She swallowed the question. "Get some sleep. I'll keep watch." "You've been watching all night. You must be exhausted." "I'm used to it." "That doesn't make it right." Emma almost smiled. "Since when does right factor into survival?" Will's expression softened. "Is that all this is to you? Survival?" Emma thought of her cabin, her solitary days, her long, silent nights. Thought of the bread she had almost eaten as her last meal. Thought of the decision she had made before that child's scream changed everything. "It's all I've got left," she said. The words hung between them heavy with truth. Will nodded slowly, understanding more than she had said. Then, without another word, he closed his eyes and let exhaustion take him. Emma watched the fire burn down to embers, watched the snow pile against the window, watched the man and child sleeping peacefully in her home, filling spaces that had been empty for 4 long years. Something stirred in her chest. Something dangerous. Hope. She crushed it immediately. Hope was for fools. Hope was what got you hurt. These strangers would leave in the morning. Her life would return to its familiar solitude, and this night would become nothing but a memory, a strange dream of connection in the depths of winter. That was what she told herself. But as dawn light crept through the frosted window, gray and cold, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years. Reluctance. She didn't want them to go, and that terrified her more than any storm ever could. Morning came gray and cold. Emma woke to silence so complete it rang in her ears. No wind howling, no snow battering the walls, just the soft crackle of dying embers and the steady breathing of 2 people who had somehow become familiar in the space of a single night. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling she had memorized over 4 years of sleepless nights. Her chest felt heavy. Wrong. Today they would leave. Today her cabin would return to its tomb like quiet. Today she would be alone again. Emma pushed herself up and moved to the window. The world outside gleamed white and gold under a pale winter sun. Beautiful, dangerous, passable. The storm had stopped. It stopped. Will's voice came from behind her. Emma hadn't heard him wake. She turned to find him sitting up, his dark hair disheveled, his eyes already finding Sophie to make sure she still breathed, still lived, still needed him. It stopped. Emma confirmed, her voice carefully neutral. Silence stretched between them, the kind of silence that held too many words nobody wanted to say. "I should find the horses," Will said, standing stiffly. They'll have sheltered in the South Canyon. I know the spot. Then you'll be gone by noon. Out of your way." Emma finally turned to face him. He stood by the cold hearth already dressed in his now dry clothes. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those gray winter eyes, held something she couldn't name. Regret, maybe, or the same reluctance she felt. "Sophie's still sleeping," Will said. "She needs rest. Yesterday took a lot out of her." Emma nodded. The child had been quieter as the night wore on, more clingy. She had held Emma's hand for an hour before finally falling asleep, her small fingers wrapped around Emma's weathered ones like anchors. "Will," he paused, coat half buttoned. Emma's throat closed around the words she wanted to say. "Stay. Don't go. I don't want to be alone again. I don't want to go back to waiting for death." "Be careful," she said instead. "Snow's deep." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or understanding. "I'll be back in a few hours," he said. Then he was gone, and Emma stood at the window watching him disappear into the white distance, her hands gripping the sill until her knuckles ached. "He's coming back right—" Emma spun around. Sophie stood in the doorway, bare feet on cold floor, dark hair tangled from sleep eyes, huge with worry that no 6-year-old should have to carry. "He's coming back," Emma said quickly, crossing to the child. "Just gone to find your horses." "Oh." Sophie's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good." Emma knelt down, taking the child's cold hands in her own. "Let's get you by the fire. Your feet are freezing." They sat together on the floor, wrapped in quilts, while Emma built up the flames. Sophie leaned against her side like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she had always belonged there, like Emma had always been someone worth leaning on. "I don't want to go," Sophie said quietly. Emma's hand stilled on the kindling. "I like it here," Sophie continued, her voice small. "It's cozy. It feels—" She struggled for the word. "Safe. You have a home, sweetheart, a real home with your papa." "The big house is too big." Sophie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Mama's things are still there. Her dresses, her hairbrush. Papa won't move them." She swallowed hard. "Sometimes I forget she's gone. Then I remember, and it hurts all over again." Emma's chest constricted. She knew that pain. The forgetting and remembering. The moment each morning when you woke up and had to learn all over again that they were gone. The fresh wound that never quite healed. "That's how grief works, honey," Emma said, pulling the child closer. "It sneaks up on you when you're not looking." "Does it ever stop hurting?" Emma looked into the fire, watching flames dance and flicker with life. "No," she admitted. "But it gets quieter over time, like a storm that moves into the distance. You can still hear it, but it doesn't shake your walls anymore." Sophie considered this with the seriousness of children who have had to grow up too fast. "How long does that take?" "Different for everyone." "How long for you?" Emma looked at this child who saw too much, understood too much. "I'm still waiting." Sophie's small hand found hers. "Maybe you need someone to wait with." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Simple, true, devastating. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Will stood in the threshold, breathing hard snow in his hair. His face was tight with something Emma couldn't read. "Found the horses," he said. "Both of them." "That's good," Emma said, standing. "And something else." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Riders, about a mile out, heading this way." Emma's blood chilled. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. "You recognize them?" "No." His jaw tightened. "But they're moving fast, like they know where they're going." Emma was already reaching for the rifle above the door. "Could be trappers." "Could be. Could be trouble." She met his eyes. "You bring trouble with you, Will Harrison?" He ran a hand through his damp hair. "I don't know. Maybe. There's been some problems back home." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that comes with money." His voice was bitter. "People who want what I have. People who think a widower with a young daughter is an easy target." Emma's grip tightened on the rifle. "Who?" "There's a woman. Victoria Sterling." He said the name like it tasted foul. "Her husband died last year. Left her comfortable but not rich. She's been persistent about wanting to marry me. Says Sophie needs a mother. Says a child can't grow up proper without a woman's influence. Persistent how? Trying to convince the town I'm unfit to raise Sophie alone, that I'm not thinking clearly, that she would be willing to take on the burden of being a mother to my daughter. He broke off, disgust plain on his face. She wants your money. She wants everything, and she's not above dirty tricks to get it. Sophie had gone pale. I don't like Mrs. Sterling. She smiles wrong. Emma looked at the child, then back at Will. You think she sent these riders? I don't know, but the timing. He shook his head. We were supposed to be back 3 days ago. If she reported us missing, if she convinced the sheriff I'd done something to Sophie. A chill ran down Emma's spine. She knew how small towns worked, knew how gossip spread like wildfire, how reputations could be destroyed with a whisper, a wealthy widower, a mysterious disappearance, a strange woman in the woods. The story practically wrote itself. You need to hide, she said. What? There's a root cellar under the floor, by the hearth. She was already moving, pulling back the worn rug, revealing the trapdoor beneath. Get in, both of you. Emma, I can't let you. You can and you will. She met his eyes fiercely. If those riders are looking for trouble, better they find a lonely widow than a man who matches whatever description they've been given. And if they hurt you, they won't. She hefted the rifle. This ain't my first time dealing with strangers who mean harm. Will hesitated. Every line of his body screamed resistance, male pride warring with practical sense. Papa. Sophie tugged at his coat. Miss Emma knows what she's doing. Something in his face broke. He looked at his daughter, then at Emma, and nodded once sharp. If anything happens, he said, gripping Emma's arm. The ranch is called Harrison Ridge, 2 days' ride southwest. Find it. Tell them what happened. My foreman, Henry Porter. He'll know what to do. Will, promise me. There was that word again. Promise. The word that bound and broke and held people together against all odds. I promise, Emma said. He held her gaze for a long moment, his gray eyes searching hers for something she couldn't name. Then he lifted Sophie into his arms and climbed down into the darkness of the cellar. Emma handed him a lantern, a blanket. Stay quiet, no matter what you hear. Emma. His voice rose from the shadows. Thank you for everything. She closed the trapdoor before she could respond, replaced the rug, steadied her breathing. The rifle felt good in her hands. Familiar. Heavy with purpose. She moved to the window and waited. They came 20 minutes later. 4 riders, just as Will had said. They approached slowly, fanning out as they neared the cabin. One of them dismounted while the others hung back, hands near their weapons. The leader was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a face weathered by wind and cruelty in equal measure. He wore the badge of a deputy on his chest, but his eyes held none of the law's supposed justice. Emma opened the door before he could knock. Afternoon, ma'am. He tipped his hat, but his eyes were already scanning the cabin behind her, searching for what he expected to find. Name's Deputy Cole Matthews, looking for a man and a girl. Got reports they've gone missing. Emma kept her expression neutral, her hand casual on the doorframe blocking entry. Missing, you say? That's right. Man named William Harrison. Little girl about yay high. He held his hand at hip level. You seen them? Emma's heart pounded against her ribs like a fist against a door. She forced it steady, forced her voice calm. I've been snowed in for 3 days, Deputy. Haven't seen a soul. Matthew's eyes narrowed. Mind if we take a look around? I mind a great deal. Emma didn't move from the doorway. This is my property. I don't know you, and I don't appreciate strangers demanding entry into my home. Now, ma'am. You got a warrant, Deputy. His jaw tightened. This is a rescue mission, not an investigation. Then you won't mind riding on and looking elsewhere? Emma's hand drifted to where the rifle leaned, just inside the door, visible enough to make her point. I told you I haven't seen anyone. You calling me a liar? One of the other riders shifted in his saddle. We should check the area, Deputy. They could be... "I heard the lady," Matthew said, holding up a hand, but his eyes bored into Emma's hard and searching. "Strange thing, though. Woman living out here alone. Not many folks do that." "Not many folks mind their own business either," Emma replied coolly. "Yet here we are." Matthew's face reddened. For a moment Emma thought he might push past her anyway, might force his way in and damn the consequences. His eyes dropped to the rifle visible at her side. "If you see them," he said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "you send word to town. There's a lady very concerned about that little girl's welfare." "I'm sure there is." The bitterness in Emma's voice made Matthews pause. "Something you want to say, ma'am?" Emma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I think you've said plenty, Deputy. Safe travels." She closed the door in his face. Through the window she watched them argue. Matthews gestured toward the cabin. Another rider shook his head. They conferred for long minutes while Emma's heart hammered and her hands sweated on the rifle stock. Finally they mounted up and rode east, disappearing into the tree line. Emma waited 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour watching the horizon, making sure they were truly gone. Only when she was certain did she pull back the rug and open the trap door. Will climbed out first, Sophie clinging to his neck. His face was pale in the dim light. "You heard," Emma said, not a question. "Every word." He set Sophie down gently, his hands shaking slightly. "Victoria, she actually did it. She's trying to take Sophie from me." "On what grounds?" "Whatever grounds she can manufacture. Unfit father. Suspicious disappearance." His hands clenched into fists. "It doesn't matter if it's true. If she gets enough people talking, if she convinces the sheriff, then we stop her," Emma said. Will looked at her sharply. "We—" The word had slipped out without thought. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You saved my life by showing me I still had a reason to live. I don't abandon debts. This isn't your fight. Maybe I want it to be." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sophie looked back and forth between them, a smile tugging at her lips, despite the fear still clouding her eyes. "So you're coming with us?" the child asked hopefully. Emma opened her mouth closed. It looked at Will. He wasn't smiling. His expression was serious, searching, asking a question he wouldn't put into words. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "I meant what I said. We'll be gone by noon. You can go back to your life." Emma looked around her cabin, the walls that had sheltered her, the silence that had protected her, the loneliness that had been slowly, surely killing her for 4 long years. "My life," she repeated. "Yes." She thought of Sophie's small hand in hers, of Will's gray eyes across the firelight, of laughter she had forgotten she knew how to make, of feeling useful, needed alive again. "What if I don't want my life anymore?" she said softly. Will's breath caught. "I'm not saying—" Emma started, then stopped. "Those riders will be back, and when they don't find you on the trail, they'll start looking closer, at cabins, at women who acted suspicious." "Then come with us," Will said, stepping closer. "Just until this is settled. You can stay at the ranch. Henry will give you work, room and board. When it's over—" He paused. "When it's over, you decide what comes next." "Fair enough," Emma said. Sophie squealed and threw her arms around Emma's legs. "You're coming! You're really coming!" Emma's hand moved to the child's hair before she could stop it. Soft, tangled from sleep, warm, real. "Reckon I am," she murmured. She had no idea what she was doing. No plan, no safety net, nothing but a rifle and a promise and 2 strangers who felt like something she had lost long ago and found again in the strangest of places. It was probably the stupidest decision she'd ever made. It was also the first time in 4 years she'd felt truly alive. They rode out within the hour. Emma packed light because there wasn't much to pack. Her rifle, her mother's Bible, a change of clothes, the quilt she couldn't leave behind. Everything else she left. The cabin had been a hiding place, not a home. She had known that for years, had just refused to admit it until now. Will's horse was strong enough to carry double. Emma sat behind him, her arms around his waist, trying not to notice how warm he was, how solid, How right it felt to hold on to something real after 4 years of holding on to nothing but memories and regrets. Sophie rode the second horse like she'd been born in the saddle, which she probably had. The girl chattered despite the cold, pointing out tracks in the snow, asking questions that never seemed to end, filling the silence Emma had grown too accustomed to. 2 days to the ranch, Will said over his shoulder. We'll avoid the main roads. They'll be watching for you. Let them watch. His voice hardened with determination. I'm done running. They traveled through the afternoon, stopping only to water the horses at a half-frozen creek. The snow was deep, but the sky stayed clear. By nightfall they had covered 15 miles, putting distance between themselves and whatever pursuit might follow. They made camp in a sheltered hollow building, a small fire that wouldn't be visible from the road. Sophie fell asleep almost immediately, curled between them like a puppy seeking warmth. You should rest, Will said quietly when the child's breathing had slowed to the rhythm of sleep. So should you. Can't. My mind's too loud. Emma understood. She sat across from him, the fire between them, and waited. Victoria came to the ranch 6 months after Margaret died, Will said finally, staring into the flames. Brought food, offered condolences, seemed kind enough at first. But then she started positioning herself, suggesting Sophie needed a woman's influence, hinting that I couldn't manage alone. At first I thought she was just being helpful, neighborly. Then I realized she was building a case, making sure people saw her being motherly to Sophie, being supportive of the poor, grieving widower. His voice dripped with disgust. Setting the stage. For what? For marriage. She made it clear she'd be willing to take on the burden of being my wife. For Sophie's sake, of course, for the good of the family. He laughed bitterly. She owns the general store in town, has money, connections. Half the town council owes her favors from when her husband was alive. Emma thought of the deputy's suspicious eyes, the way he had looked at her cabin like it was hiding secrets. If she convinces them you're unfit, she can petition the court for custody, or force me to marry her by making the alternative too painful to bear. Will poked at the fire viciously. Either way, she wins. What's her real angle? She can't just take your daughter. Money, land. The ranch brings in $30,000 a year. If she marries me, she gets everything. If I refuse and she gets Sophie, she controls Sophie's inheritance. Either way, she gets what she wants. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. She thought of her own loss, her own powerlessness. The fever hadn't cared about her prayers or her nursing or her desperate screaming love, but this was different. This was a human enemy with human weaknesses. This could be fought. Then we fight, she said. Will looked up sharply. I don't know how yet, Emma continued, but I know one thing. That woman isn't getting this child. Not while I'm breathing. Something shifted in Will's expression. Surprise, wonder, hope he was afraid to feel. You barely know us, he said. I know enough. Emma met his eyes across the flames. I know Sophie lost her mother too young. I know you're trying your best in impossible circumstances. I know you fixed my roof without being asked and hunted in a blizzard to earn your keep. She took a breath. I know what it is to lose everything and keep living anyway. And I know that anyone who'd hurt a child to get what they want doesn't deserve to win. Will was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. Why are you doing this? He asked finally. Really? Emma looked at Sophie sleeping peacefully between them. Looked at this man who had stumbled into her life like a storm, leaving everything changed in his wake. Because 4 years ago I prayed for death, she said quietly. Every night for a year I begged God to take me too. He didn't. I thought that meant he'd abandoned me. She stopped, swallowed hard. But maybe he was just waiting for me to be ready. Ready for what? Emma didn't answer. Couldn't. The words were too big, too terrifying. But Will nodded like he understood anyway. Get some sleep, he said gently. We've got a long ride tomorrow. Emma lay down beside Sophie, pulling the child close. The little girl stirred, mumbled something, then burrowed deeper against her. Trust. This small person trusted her completely. Emma closed her eyes, and for the first time in 4 years, didn't dream of the dead. Morning came cold and bright. They broke camp quickly, eating dried meat and hard bread as they rode. Sophie chattered about the ranch, the horses, the cattle, the foreman named Henry, who taught her to rope, even though Papa said she was too young. "He's grumpy," she confided to Emma, "but he makes good biscuits. That's a useful quality in a person." "That's what Papa says," Sophie grinned. "You'll like him. He's loyal. That's what matters most, Papa says. Loyal and true." Emma glanced at Will, who was scanning the tree line ahead with the wariness of a man who had learned not to trust easy horizons. "Trouble?" she asked. "Not sure." He slowed his horse. "Thought I saw movement." They stopped, listened. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. "Emma," Will's voice was low, "take Sophie. Ride east. There's a settlement called Miller's Creek about. I'm not leaving you. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. Emma, I'm telling you. And I'm telling you no." She urged her horse forward until she was beside him. "We face this together or not at all." Before he could argue, 3 riders emerged from the trees ahead. Not deputies this time. These men were harder, rougher, the kind who hired out their muscle for coin and didn't ask questions about the morality of the work. The leader smiled, showing teeth gone brown from tobacco. "Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Sterling sends her regards." Will's hand moved to his rifle. "I don't want trouble." "Then you shouldn't have made any." The man's eyes slid to Emma, assessing her like livestock at auction. "Who's the woman new wife already?" That was fast. "None of your concern." "See, that's where you're wrong. Everything about you is Mrs. Sterling's concern. She's been real worried." He urged his horse closer. "Little girl missing in a blizzard. Father acting strange, taking off without telling anyone. Folk are starting to talk." "Let them talk. They're doing more than that." The man's smile widened. "Sheriff's real interested in having a conversation with you, about where you've been, who you've been with." His eyes raked over Emma again, making her skin crawl. "I'm sure there's an innocent explanation, but a widow woman living alone young enough to catch a rich man's eye, well, people will think what they think." Emma's blood boiled. "You got something to say it plain." The man laughed. "Got fire, this one. I like that." "Then you'll love this." Emma raised her rifle in one smooth motion, the muscle memory of 4 years protecting herself in the wilderness taking over. "Ride away now, or I'll put a bullet between your eyes and feed your corpse to the wolves." The man's smile froze. His companions shifted hands, moving to their weapons. The air crackled with tension. "Easy now," the leader said slowly. "No need for anyone to get hurt." "Then leave." "Can't do that, ma'am. Mrs. Sterling is expecting." Emma fired. The bullet tore past his ear close enough to graze skin. The man's horse reared, nearly throwing him. He grabbed the saddle horn, face white with shock. "That was a warning," Emma said calmly, already reloading. "Next one won't be." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then the leader laughed high and sharp and genuinely surprised. "Well, well." He steadied his horse, one hand pressed to his bleeding ear. "Maybe you ain't just a pretty face after all." "I'm a widow who's buried everyone she ever loved," Emma said, her voice ice. "You think I'm afraid of 3 hired guns on horseback?" The men exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some calculation of risk versus reward. "We'll be seeing you again," the leader said finally. "Mrs. Sterling doesn't give up easy." "Neither do I." They turned and rode away, disappearing into the trees. Emma kept the rifle raised until she couldn't hear hoofbeats anymore. Then her hands started shaking. Will was beside her in an instant, taking the rifle, steadying her horse. Emma, look at me." She met his eyes and saw wonder there, and fear, and something else she couldn't name. "You could have been killed," he said. "So could you. That's different." "How?" He didn't answer. just looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her all the strength she had hidden beneath grief and loneliness and 4 years of just surviving. "You shot at him," he finally said. "Missed on purpose, by half an inch." Emma's laugh was shaky. "James taught me to shoot. Always said I had good aim." Will shook his head slowly, something like awe in his expression. "Who are you, Emma Thornton?" "I don't know anymore." She looked down at her trembling hands. "But I think I'm about to find out." Sophie had been silent through the entire confrontation. Now she urged her horse forward, her small face fierce and proud. "I knew it," she said. "I knew you were special." Emma pulled the child close with one arm, breathing in the scent of her hair, letting the reality of what had just happened settle into her bones. "I'm not special, sweetheart, just stubborn." "That's what Papa says about the best horses," Sophie said seriously. "The stubborn ones are worth keeping." Will met Emma's eyes over his daughter's head. His expression said everything his voice couldn't. Worth keeping. The ranch appeared at sunset on the second day. Emma saw it from the ridge and felt her breath catch. Sprawling land stretched in every direction. Vast herds dotted the valley, and rising against the darkening sky a house that looked more like a fortress than a home. 3 stories of solid timber, smoke curled from 3 chimneys, lights flickered in windows warm and welcoming. It was everything her cabin wasn't, everything she had told herself she didn't need. "Welcome to Harrison Ridge," Will said quietly. Sophie was already racing ahead, whooping with joy. "Henry, Henry, we're home." A figure emerged from the main house. Tall, weathered, silver-haired, moving with the easy confidence of a man who knew his own worth. He caught Sophie as she launched herself from the saddle, swinging her in a circle despite his years. "Well, look what the storm dragged in." His voice was gruff, but warm. "Gave us quite a scare little miss." "We had an adventure, Henry." Sophie was practically vibrating with excitement. "And we found Emma. She saved us from freezing, and she shot at bad men, and she's going to stay forever." Emma's face heated. "I didn't exactly." Henry's sharp eyes found her, assessed her in a single glance that took in her worn clothes, her calloused hands, her rifle still clutched like a lifeline. His weathered face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "So you're the one," he said. The one who finally got him to come home." Emma didn't know how to answer that. She stood in the fading light, dust-covered and bone-tired, while ranch hands gathered to stare at the stranger their boss had brought back from the wilderness. "I'm nobody," she said finally. "Just someone who happened to be in the right place." Henry studied her with eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by humble words. Right place, wrong time, and still pulled a rifle on 3 of Victoria's hired guns. He glanced at Will. "Word travels fast out here." "How bad is it?" Will asked, dismounting stiffly. "Bad enough." Henry set Sophie down gently. "Victoria's been making noise all over town, talking about how you disappeared with the child, how nobody knows where you went, how maybe—" He stopped, glanced at Sophie. "How maybe you weren't thinking clearly." "Say it." Will's voice was tight. Henry's jaw worked. "How maybe you did something to her, lost your mind with grief." The words hit like punches. Emma watched Will's face go white, watched his hands clench at his sides. "That's a lie," she said sharply. "I watched this man hunt in a blizzard to feed his daughter. I watched him stay awake all night to make sure she was safe. He's the best father I've ever seen." Henry's eyebrows rose. "You willing to say that in front of Judge Morrison?" "I'll say it in front of God himself, if that's what it takes." Something flickered in the old foreman's face. Surprise? Respect? Maybe the first hint of approval. "Well then," he nodded slowly. "Reckon we got ourselves a fight." The ranch house swallowed Emma whole. She had never seen anything like it. High ceilings that seemed to stretch toward heaven, polished wood that gleamed in lamplight, a staircase that curved up to the second floor like something from a dream. She felt small here, dirty, wrong. "This way, ma'am." A woman appeared at her elbow, round-faced and kind-eyed, wearing an apron dusted with flour. "Mr. Harrison asked me to show you to your room. I'm Ruth Coleman. Been with the family 15 years. Emma followed her up those impossible stairs, too exhausted to argue, too overwhelmed to do anything but put one foot in front of the other. The room Ruth led her to was larger than her entire cabin. A real bed with a carved headboard, a washstand with a porcelain basin, curtains on the windows that looked like they cost more than Emma had earned in her entire life. "I had the boys bring up hot water," Ruth said, gesturing to the steaming pitcher. "You'll find clean clothes in the wardrobe, Mrs. Harrison's things." She paused, her voice gentling. "Mr. Will said you might be about her size." Emma's throat tightened. "I can't wear a dead woman's clothes." "They're just clothes now, ma'am. She'd want them used. Margaret was practical that way." Alone, Emma stood in the middle of the room and tried to remember how to breathe. What was she doing here? This wasn't her world. These weren't her people. She was a widow from a one-room cabin, not someone who belonged in a house with staircases and servants and rooms bigger than dreams. She should leave, slip away in the night before she embarrassed herself further. A knock at the door. "Emma?" Sophie's voice small and hopeful. "Can I come in?" Emma opened the door. The child stood there in a fresh nightgown, her dark hair damp and combed, smelling of soap and safety. "I wanted to say good night," Sophie said, shifting from foot to foot. And I wanted to make sure you were still here." "I'm here." "Promise you won't leave. Promise you'll stay." Emma knelt down, taking the child's hands. They were so small, so trusting. "I don't know how long I can stay, sweetheart." "Forever." Sophie's grip tightened. "Stay forever. Forever." The word lodged in Emma's chest like a splinter, painful and impossible to remove. "I'll stay as long as I can," she said carefully. "But forever's a long time." "That's what Mama said." Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said she'd stay forever. Then she didn't." Emma pulled the child into her arms and held on tight. "I know," she murmured. "I know, baby. I know." She stayed until Sophie fell asleep in her own bed down the hall, stayed until the child's breathing slowed and steadied, stayed until her own legs ached from kneeling on the hard floor. When she finally crept back to her room, she found Will waiting in the hallway. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being kind to her. She makes it easy. She's terrified of losing people." Will leaned against the wall, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "After Margaret, she had nightmares for months. Screaming, clawing at the air. I didn't know how to help her. You were there. That was enough." "Was it?" His laugh was bitter. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm making everything worse. If she'd be better off with—" "Don't!" Emma's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." Will stared at her. "That child loves you more than anything in this world," Emma continued fiercely. "She talks about you like you hung the moon. Whatever mistakes you think you've made, and we all make them, you are her father, her safe place, her home." She stepped closer, jabbing a finger at his chest. "And if you think for 1 second that giving her up to some scheming woman who only wants your money would be better for her, then you're not the man I thought you were." Will caught her hand. His grip was warm, gentle, nothing like the rage in her words deserved. "What man do you think I am, Emma?" The question stopped her cold. She stood there, hand in his heart, hammering, unable to speak. "Because I'm starting to wonder," Will continued softly, "if you see someone I've forgotten how to be." Emma pulled away, her cheeks burning. "Get some sleep. We've got a fight coming." She closed the door between them before he could respond. The wedding happened 3 days later. Not because of love, though Emma felt that stirring in her chest more each day. Not because of tradition or propriety or any of the reasons people usually married. They married because Victoria Sterling had given them no choice. "If we're legally wed, she can't claim you're just some woman taking advantage," Will explained, sitting across from Emma in his study. "As my wife, you have every right to be here, to help with Sophie, to run the ranch if I'm unable." Emma understood the logic, hated that it made sense. A marriage of convenience. A strategic alliance. Will's gray eyes held hers. Nothing more. Unless— He stopped himself. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. And when Victoria's defeated, when the threat is gone, then we decide, together, what happens next. Emma thought of her cabin, her isolation, the loneliness that had nearly killed her, thought of Sophie's small hand in hers, a feeling needed useful alive. All right, she said, I'll marry you. The ceremony was small. Judge Morrison presided, the same judge who would later dismiss Victoria's lawsuit. Henry and Ruth stood as witnesses. Sophie held a bouquet of dried wildflowers beaming like Christmas had come early. Emma wore one of Margaret's dresses altered to fit. Simple blue cotton, nothing fancy. Will wore his Sunday best, standing tall beside her. Do you, William Harrison, take Emma Thornton to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Emma Thornton, take William Harrison to be your lawfully wedded husband? Emma looked at Will, at the hope in his eyes, at Sophie watching with such desperate eagerness, at this life she hadn't planned but somehow needed. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Will kissed her. Gentle, careful. A kiss that promised nothing and everything all at once. Sophie threw her flowers in the air. You're married. You're really married. Now Emma can't leave. Emma caught the child as she launched herself forward, held her tight. Over Sophie's head her eyes met Will's. This was supposed to be convenience, strategy, protection. So why did it feel like something far more dangerous? Why did it feel like home? That night Emma moved her few belongings into the guest room next to Will's chamber. Not his room, not yet, maybe never. They had made an agreement, a business arrangement. But when she closed her door and stood alone in the darkness, she could still feel his lips on hers, could still hear Sophie's joy, could still remember the moment she'd said, I do, and meant it more than she'd expected. 3 days married, and already she couldn't imagine going back to who she'd been before. The accident happened on the 3rd day. Will was working with a young stallion in the training corral, breaking the animal to saddle. Emma watched from the fence, Sophie beside her, when the horse spooked at something, a shadow or a sound she couldn't name. The stallion reared. Will held on muscle and Will fighting against raw panic. For a moment it seemed he might win. Then the horse twisted midair and came down hard. Wrong. Will hit the ground with a sound Emma would hear in nightmares for weeks. The sickening crack of bone. His scream cut short. The stallion's hooves too close too fast. Emma was running before she thought, vaulted the fence like James had taught her years ago when they had their own small farm. She grabbed the stallion's trailing reins, pulled the panicked animal away from Will's crumpled form. Get Dr. Morrison, she shouted at Henry, who had appeared from the barn. Now. Will lay in the dirt, his face white as snow, his right leg bent at an angle that made Emma's stomach turn. She had seen enough injuries on the farm to know. This was bad, very bad. Don't move, she said, kneeling beside him. Her hands were already checking for other injuries the way Dr. Morrison had taught her when Benjamin was sick, when she'd spent hours learning everything she could about healing because she couldn't bear to feel helpless again. Sophie, Will gasped through gritted teeth. She's fine. Henry's got her. Emma stripped off her coat, folded it, slid it under his head. You're going to be fine, too. Leg. I know. She pulled her knife from her boot, cut away his pant leg to see the damage. Worse than she'd feared. The bone had broken clean through white edges visible through torn flesh. He was bleeding but not spurting. That was something. Emma. His hand gripped hers. It's bad, isn't it? She met his eyes. Yes, but I've set bones before, on the farm. Animals mostly, but James broke his arm once. I can stabilize this until Dr. Morrison gets here. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She was already tearing strips from her petticoat, fashioning a tourniquet. Now be quiet and let me work. The next hour blurred. Emma set the bone as best she could, Will biting down on leather to keep from screaming. She splinted the leg with fence boards and rope, kept him conscious, kept him talking, kept the blood loss minimal. When Dr. Morrison finally arrived, he took one look at Emma's work and nodded. "You saved his leg," he said quietly. "Maybe his life. If that bone had shifted wrong, if the bleeding had been worse. You did good, Mrs. Harrison." Will spent 3 weeks in bed after that. The break was clean but severe. Dr. Morrison said he'd walk again, but it would take time. Might leave a limp, might ache in winter, but he'd walk. And Emma ran the ranch alone. 3 weeks passed in a blur of learning and adapting. Emma woke before dawn each day to work with Henry, learning the rhythm of the ranch. Which cattle were ready for market, which hands were reliable and which needed watching. How to read ledgers and balance books and make decisions that affected 50 men's livelihoods. The hands didn't trust her at first. She saw it in their faces at the morning meetings. Confusion, skepticism, a few poorly hidden smirks, a woman giving orders to men who had worked this land for years. "I know what you're thinking," Emma said that first morning, standing at the head of the table where Will usually stood. "I'm new here. I don't know cattle from sheep. I married your boss 3 weeks ago, and now I'm telling you what to do." Nobody spoke. A few shifted uncomfortably. "Here's what I do know." Emma's voice hardened. "I know how to work. I know how to survive when everything's falling apart. And I know that Mr. Harrison trusts me to keep this place running while he heals." She met their eyes one by one. "So we can do this the hard way, where you fight me every step and we all suffer. Or we can do this the smart way, where you teach me what I don't know, and I work harder than anyone to make up for it." Silence. Then Henry stepped forward. "You heard the lady. South pasture needs checking after all that snow. Miller take 2 men. Thompson, we're short on feed in the east barn. Get it sorted." The hands moved. Not happily, but they moved. "Thank you," Emma murmured to Henry. "Don't thank me yet," the old foreman said. "That was the easy part. They'll test you every day, every decision. You show weakness, they'll eat you alive." "Then I won't show weakness." Henry smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "No, I don't reckon you will." The testing started immediately. A hand named Jack Dawkins questioned her order to move cattle to the lower fields. Emma stood her ground, explained her reasoning. The weather was shifting. The upper pastures would freeze first. She didn't flinch when he muttered under his breath. The next day her decision proved right. The upper pastures froze solid overnight. Dawkins stopped muttering. A fence broke in the west section. The hands expected her to send someone else to fix it. Emma rode out herself, worked alongside them in the cold until her hands blistered and her back ached. She came home to respect in their eyes. Day by day she learned. Night by night she sat with Will and told him everything. Her victories, her mistakes, her fears. "You're doing better than I did my first month," Will said one evening, propped up in bed with his injured leg elevated. "And I grew up here. I'm terrified every minute. Doesn't show." He pulled her closer on the bed where she had taken to sitting beside him after Sophie fell asleep. "Emma, you're remarkable." "I'm stubborn. There's a difference." "There really isn't." She laughed and he laughed with her, and for a moment everything felt possible. Then the world reminded them that nothing good lasted without a fight. It started with a visitor. Emma was in the garden with Sophie teaching the girl how to check for frost damage on winter vegetables when a woman arrived at the door. Young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and a worn traveling dress. She clutched a carpet bag like it contained everything she owned, because it probably did. "Mrs. Harrison," the woman's voice shook. "My name is Sarah Miller. I heard about you, what you did, how you came from nothing and—" She stopped, swallowed. "I don't know where else to go." Emma studied her, saw the bruise half hidden by her collar, the way she flinched when a door slammed somewhere in the house, the desperate hope in her eyes. "Who hurt you?" Emma asked quietly. Sarah's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "My husband. I tried to leave once before. He found me, said next time he'd kill me." Emma's blood ran cold. She thought of James, gentle James, who had never raised his hand to anyone. Thought of Will, who treated her like something precious. Not all women were so lucky. Where is he now? Back in Denver. I took the morning coach before he woke. Sarah wiped her eyes frantically. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come. I didn't know where else. Hush. Emma stepped forward and took the woman's shaking hands. You came to exactly the right place. Within a month, 2 more women had appeared at the ranch, then 3 more. They came from all over. Denver, Kansas City, small towns with names nobody remembered. Some had children. Some carried scars, visible and invisible. All of them had nowhere else to go. Emma took them in. You're running a refuge, Henry observed one evening watching a young mother chase her toddler across the yard. I'm helping people who need it. Same thing. Henry considered this. We'll need more space if this keeps up. Already thought of that. He handed her a paper with sketches. Plans for expanding the bunkhouse. Add a kitchen, separate sleeping quarters. Make it proper. Emma stared at the drawings. When did you have time to do this? Man gets bored just managing cattle. Henry almost smiled. Besides what you're doing, it's right. Someone ought to have done it years ago. We'll need money. You've got money. Will appeared behind her, leaning on his crutch. His leg was healing, but slowly. Use it. Emma turned. It's your money. It's our money, and I can't think of a better way to spend it. She kissed him right there in the yard in front of Henry and the hands and anyone else who might be watching. Let them watch. She was done hiding from life, but not everyone approved of what Emma was building. The whispers started in town. The good women of the community didn't know what to make of a ranch that sheltered fallen women, broken women who had fled their proper places. And Victoria Sterling knew exactly how to use that disapproval. Emma was in town buying supplies when she first felt the change. The merchant at the general store, Mr. Peterson, who had always been friendly enough, looked at her with cold eyes. I'm afraid I can't sell to you today, Mrs. Harrison. Why not? Don't serve murderers. He said it loud enough for others to hear. Word is, you killed your first husband, poisoned him for his farm, came to Colorado to find your next victim. The words hit like bullets. Emma stood frozen, feeling every eye in the store turn toward her, judging, condemning. That's a lie, she said quietly. Is it funny how your husband died so sudden, how you married Mr. Harrison so quick, how you've got your claws in his money now? Peterson's face twisted with righteous anger. We don't want your kind here. Emma walked out with her head high and her purchases left behind. She rode home in silence, rage and humiliation burning in her chest. Will was waiting on the porch. One look at her face told him everything. What happened? Emma couldn't speak, couldn't explain. She just shook her head and walked past him into the house. He followed, moving awkwardly on his healing leg. Emma, talk to me. They're saying I killed James. The words came out flat. Dead. Poisoned him. That I came here to trap you. That I'm a murderer. Will's face went white, then red. She had never seen him truly angry before. The transformation was terrifying. Who's saying this? Everyone. Emma sank into a chair. It's all over town. The merchant wouldn't sell to me. Said he doesn't serve murderers. Which merchant? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. And what, you'll hobble over there on one leg and defend my honor? Emma laughed bitterly. This is Victoria. Has to be. She can't beat us directly, so she's destroying me instead. Then we fight back. How I can't prove I didn't kill my husband. I can't prove something that didn't happen. Will lowered himself into the chair across from her, his face lined with pain from his leg or from watching her suffer. She couldn't tell which. You have witnesses, he said. People who knew you in Missouri, who saw James die of fever. That's hundreds of miles away, and even if I could reach them, we reach them. Will leaned forward. We write letters. We gather statements. We build a case so solid that Victoria's lies crumble under their own weight. That could take months. Then it takes months. His hand found hers. "I'm not letting her win, Emma. Not after everything." Emma looked at him. This man who should be resting, healing, letting others fight his battles. Instead, he was ready to go to war for her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you keep fighting for me?" His answer was simple, quiet, devastating. "Because I love you." Emma's breath stopped. "You don't have to say it back." Will continued quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I need you to know. You're not alone. You never will be again." She stared at him. This man who had stumbled into her cabin in a blizzard. This man who had seen her at her worst and lowest and still chose her, still fought for her, still loved her. Her voice caught. "I don't know if I know." He smiled softly. "It's all right. Take your time." But something had shifted, something fundamental. Emma looked at him, really looked, and saw not a stranger, not a partner of convenience, but something else entirely, something that felt terrifying and wonderful and impossibly achingly right. She leaned forward and kissed him, not gentle, not questioning, a kiss that said everything her words couldn't. Will made a sound of surprise, then pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her hair. The kiss deepened. The world narrowed to just the two of them. Just this moment, just this impossible, perfect feeling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma's cheeks were wet with tears she hadn't felt falling. "I think," she swallowed, "I think I might love you too." Will's smile was sunrise after a long winter. "Yeah. Don't make me say it again. Wouldn't dream of it." The letters went out the next week. Emma wrote to everyone she could remember from Missouri. The doctor who had treated James, the preacher who had spoken at his funeral, the neighbors who had brought food during the fever. And she wrote to someone else, someone she hadn't thought about in years, Sarah Thornton, James's younger sister who had moved to Kansas after the funeral. The response came 3 weeks later. Emma was in the barn checking on a sick calf when Henry found her. "Letter for you," he said, "from Kansas." Her hand shook as she opened it. "Dear Emma, I wept when I read your letter. All these years I thought you blamed me for not coming to help when James and Benjamin were sick. I couldn't face you, couldn't face my own guilt. Now I learn you've been suffering alone, accused of terrible lies. I won't stand for it. I'm coming to Colorado. I'll testify to anyone who will listen that my brother died of fever, that you nursed him until your own hands bled, that you loved him more than any woman ever loved a man. I'll be there by month's end. Your sister Sarah Emma read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred through tears. "Good news?" Henry asked gruffly. "The best." But before Sarah could arrive, Victoria made her move. The legal papers arrived on a Friday morning. Deputy Matthews delivered them personally, his face carefully neutral as he handed them to Will. "You're being sued," Matthews said. "Mrs. Sterling is bringing formal charges against your wife." "On what grounds?" Will's voice was dangerously quiet. "Murder, fraud, deception. It's all in there." Matthews tipped his hat. "Court date set for 2 weeks from today. Judge Morrison presiding." He rode away, leaving them staring at legal documents that could destroy everything. Emma read through them, her hands steady even as her heart raced. Victoria's lawyers had built an entire case, claiming James's death was suspicious, that Emma had fled Missouri to escape investigation, that she had deliberately targeted Will, a grieving widower, with money, that she was dangerous to Sophie. "She's really doing this," Emma said. "Yes." Will's jaw was tight. "And we're going to beat her." The day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. The whole town had turned out to watch. Emma sat at the defendant's table wearing one of Margaret's simple dresses, her hair pinned up her spine straight. Will beside her in a wheelchair, his legs still healing. Sophie stayed home with Ruth, spared from seeing her world potentially torn apart. Victoria Sterling sat across the aisle, flanked by expensive lawyers from Denver. Her face was marble, cold and perfect and utterly without mercy. Judge Morrison took his seat. He was an older man, white-haired and keen-eyed, with the look of someone who had seen too much of human nature to be fooled by pretense. "This court will come to order." He banged his gavel. "We're here to determine the validity of charges brought against Mrs. Emma Harrison by Mrs. Victoria Sterling. Mrs. Sterling, you filed the petition. Present your case." Victoria's lawyer stood. Alexander Thornhill, slick and polished, a man who made his living twisting truth into weapons. "Your Honor, we will prove that the defendant is a dangerous predator who has left a trail of suspicious deaths and broken hearts. A woman who murdered her first husband and has now set her sights on Mr. Harrison's considerable fortune." He painted a picture of Emma as a calculating monster. James's sudden death, Emma's isolation in Colorado waiting for the next victim, Will's convenient appearance in a blizzard, the rushed marriage, Emma's rapid takeover of the ranch. "Mrs. Sterling is prepared to present evidence." Thornhill concluded that Emma Harrison is unfit to be near any decent family, that she poses a danger to young Sophie Harrison, that she must be removed from society before she can harm anyone else. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Emma sat motionless, refusing to show fear. Judge Morrison turned to Will. "Mr. Harrison, you may respond." Will stood leaning heavily on his crutch. He wasn't a lawyer, didn't have the polish or training, but he had something better. Truth. "Your Honor, I loved my wife Margaret, loved her more than I can say. When she died, I thought I'd never recover. But I had a daughter who needed me, so I did what any father would do. I kept going." He glanced at Victoria. "My wife never spoke about her mother. Not once in 7 years of marriage. I didn't even know Mrs. Sterling existed until recently. Whatever happened between them, Margaret made her choice. She wanted Sophie raised here on this land with this family." "That family now includes a stranger," Thornhill interrupted. "A woman of no breeding, no education, no connection to the child." "That woman," Will said quietly, "is the reason my daughter smiles again." Silence fell. After Margaret died, Sophie stopped talking for 3 months, stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I tried everything. Doctors, medicines, prayers, nothing worked. Will's voice caught. "Then Emma came, and within a week my daughter was laughing again. Within a month she was calling her mama, not because Emma forced it, because Emma loved her, truly freely, without asking anything in return." He looked at Emma, love and gratitude blazing in his eyes. "Emma Harrison isn't a stranger. She's the woman who saved my family. She's the one Sophie runs to when she's scared. She's not perfect, and she doesn't pretend to be. But she loves my daughter with everything she has." He faced Victoria directly. "Can you say the same, Mrs. Sterling?" Victoria's face tightened. She didn't answer. "Mr. Harrison makes a compelling, emotional argument," Thornhill said smoothly. "But emotion is not evidence. We have testimony from Missouri that—" "Your Honor." The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway. Young, maybe 28, wearing a traveling dress, her face tired from the road. Behind her stood an older man in a doctor's coat, and behind him a preacher, and behind them 6 others. "I'm Sarah Thornton," the woman said, walking forward. "James Thornton was my brother. I have something to say." Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose. "You wish to testify?" "Yes, sir. I came all the way from Kansas to tell the truth about my sister-in-law." The courtroom erupted. Victoria went pale. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "Order!" Judge Morrison banged his gavel. "Mrs. Thornton, you may speak." Sarah stood at the front of the courtroom facing the judge. "I haven't spoken to Emma in 4 years. After my brother died, I blamed her. I was young and stupid and hurting. I thought if she had just done more, tried harder, my brother would still be alive." Her voice broke. "I was wrong. Emma did everything humanly possible. She nursed James and Benjamin day and night for a week. She didn't sleep, barely ate. She held my brother's hand while he died and then held her son while he followed." Sarah turned to face Emma directly. "Typhoid fever killed them, not Emma. Emma loved them more than life itself. I watched her heart break. I saw her nearly die from grief." She looked at the judge. "Anyone who says Emma killed my brother is a liar, and I'll swear to that on any Bible you put in front of me." The doctor stood next. "Dr. Andrew Morrison. I treated James and Benjamin Thornton in their final illness. Typhoid fever, no doubt whatsoever. Mrs. Thornton did everything I prescribed and more. If anyone is to blame for their deaths, it's me for not having better medicine, not her." Pastor Williams spoke next. "I presided at the funeral. I saw Emma's grief. It was real. It was devastating. No one could fake that kind of pain." One by one, neighbors testified. People who had known Emma and James, people who had seen the fever tear through their small farm, people who remembered Emma as a devoted wife and mother broken by loss. By the time they finished, Victoria's case lay in ruins. Judge Morrison's face was grave. "Mrs. Sterling, it appears your accusations are without merit, severely without merit." "Your Honor, they're lying. All of them. She must have paid—" "Enough!" The judge's voice cracked like thunder. "I've heard enough. Mrs. Harrison's character has been more than established. This matter is closed." He banged his gavel. "Charges dismissed. Court is adjourned." The room erupted in applause. Sarah pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around Emma, both women sobbing. Will pulled them both close, his own eyes wet. Victoria stood alone, her perfect composure crumbling. She looked at Emma with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes," Emma said quietly. "It is. I won. You lost. Accept it." Victoria turned and swept from the courtroom, leaving whispers and speculation in her wake. That night the ranch celebrated. Ruth cooked enough food for an army. The hands brought out fiddles and guitars. Sarah danced with Henry, discovering the gruff foreman had a surprisingly light step. Sophie stayed up past midnight, twirling between Emma and Will like she couldn't decide who to hold on to. 3 months passed in blessed peace. Spring came early, melting the snow, turning the valley green. Will's leg healed completely, leaving only a slight limp he claimed made him look distinguished. Emma and Will became truly husband and wife, in every sense, their love deepening with each passing day. The refuge expanded. The new building was completed in April, able to house 12 women comfortably. Sarah stayed to help run it, finding purpose in helping others heal from the wounds she understood too well. Sophie thrived. She called Emma Mama without hesitation now. She talked about wanting a baby brother or sister. She drew pictures of their family, the 3 of them always together, always smiling. Emma discovered she was pregnant in late May. Will cried when she told him. Sophie danced around the kitchen. Ruth declared it was the best news since the war ended. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in June, from a lawyer in Boston, Catherine Montgomery, it said, petitioning for custody of Sophie Rose Harrison. "Who is Catherine Montgomery?" Emma asked, her hands shaking as she read. Will's face had gone gray. "Margaret's mother. Sophie's grandmother. I thought, she hasn't contacted us in 7 years. I thought she wanted nothing to do with us." But Catherine Montgomery very much wanted something, and she had the money and connections to take it. The custody hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Catherine arrived by private train, descending onto the platform like visiting royalty. She was 58, elegant in expensive mourning clothes, her face carved from ice. Emma met her in the parlor. The 2 women studied each other like generals before a battle. "So you're the nobody who married my son-in-law," Catherine said. "And you're the grandmother who abandoned your granddaughter for 7 years," Emma replied evenly. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "I had my reasons." "I'm sure you did. Money usually is a good reason for the heartless." "How dare you?" "How dare you?" Emma stepped forward. "Sophie doesn't know you, doesn't remember you. You have no place in her life. I have every place. I'm her blood, her family. Family is more than blood. It's showing up. It's being there. It's loving someone even when it's hard." Emma's voice shook with fury. "Where were you when Margaret died? Where were you when Sophie cried herself to sleep every night? Where were you when she needed a grandmother? I wasn't allowed. You're a grown woman with money and power. You could have come if you wanted to. You chose not to. And now you want to take her away from the only home she's ever known." The trial was brutal. Catherine's lawyers argued that Sophie deserved her mother's legacy: the finest schools, Boston society, culture and refinement that a ranch in Colorado could never provide. Will testified about Margaret's wishes, how she had never wanted her daughter raised in the stifling world of Boston high society, how she had chosen this life deliberately. Emma testified about loving Sophie, about being there for her every day, about not having breeding or education, but having something more important: a heart that chose this child and would never stop choosing her. But it was Sophie who won the case. Judge Morrison called her to the stand. "Sophie, do you understand what's happening here?" "Yes, sir. The lady wants to take me away." "How do you feel about that?" Sophie's chin lifted, brave and fierce. "This is my home. Papa is my papa and Emma is my mama. I have my room and my horse Buttercup and my friends. I don't want to go to Boston." "But Mrs. Montgomery is your grandmother. Don't you want to know her?" "She didn't come when Mama died." Sophie's voice was clear, unwavering. "She didn't come when I was sad. She only came now. That's not what grandmothers do." She looked at Emma. "Mama told me before she died to be brave, to let people love me, to not be scared of new families." Tears filled her eyes. "Emma is my new family. She loves me. I know because she shows me every single day." Sophie's voice broke. "Please don't make me leave." The courtroom was silent. Catherine's face had gone pale. Emma gripped Will's hand so hard her knuckles went white. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "I've seen a lot of custody cases in my time. Parents fighting over children like property, money changing hands, lawyers spinning tales." He looked at Catherine. "Mrs. Montgomery, I don't doubt you believe you're doing what's best for your granddaughter. But this child has a home, a family, parents who clearly love her." He banged his gavel. "Petition denied. Sophie Rose Harrison will remain in the custody of her father and stepmother. This matter is closed." Sophie screamed with joy and launched herself at Emma. Will wrapped his arms around both of them. The courtroom erupted in applause. Catherine left in silence, defeated and alone. That night Emma stood on the porch watching stars wheel overhead. Will came out, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Thinking about what?" he asked. "About who I was, and who I am now." "And who are you now?" Emma smiled. "Emma Harrison, wife, mother, survivor." She paused. "Happy." "Happy?" She turned in his arms. "For the first time in my life, truly, completely happy." Will kissed her softly. "Good. That's exactly who you should be." Inside, Sophie slept peacefully. Sarah and Ruth cleaned up from dinner. Henry sat by the fire reading to the women from the refuge. The ranch settled into its evening rhythm, full of life and love and second chances. Emma looked at the stars and thought about the woman she had been, the widow in the cabin waiting to die. She had opened her door to strangers in a blizzard thinking she was saving them. She had been wrong. They had saved her too. 6 months later, on a cold December night, Emma gave birth to a son. They named him Benjamin James Harrison after the loved ones they had lost. Sophie held him with careful reverence, declaring herself the best big sister in Colorado. Will sat beside Emma's bed, holding her hand, looking at their family with wonder. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Emma replied. And from the doorway, Sophie whispered, "I love you both." Outside, snow began to fall, but inside, wrapped in warmth and love, and the family they had chosen, nobody was afraid of winter anymore. They had survived the storm and found home in each other.